Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. Force here, and today I'm going to talk with you a bit about Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. A couple weeks ago, I got a chance to sit down and go hands-on with a preview build for the game. This is a new first-person open-world shooter from Ubisoft, set, of course, in the Avatar universe. Now, I've seen a lot of early impressions already go out for this, and I kept seeing continual references to the Far Cry series, but it's worth noting that this game is being developed by Ubisoft Massive, the studio behind The Division. This isn't the Far Cry team making a Far Cry game with an Avatar skin. No, this is the Division team making their very first-person open world game, although that distinction might not be necessary as there is an undeniable resemblance in the game's structure to that of the Far Cry series. However, I'm not quite sure as of yet how much of that is just down to the fact that this is an open world game and has many of the expected open world systems and features. I sat down for a little over 2 hours with the game, which was enough for me to see and do a few things, but really not that much. I will say at least my initial gut reaction was that this feels a bit different from any Ubisoft open world game that I have played in recent memory. How much of that is due to the game setting versus the mechanics and structure? Well, we'll have to wait and see until I get the chance to play much more. As of now, though, with the time I did have, I got to do a bit of exploration, gathering, hunting. I tested out the game's combat, completed a few side activities, along with a couple of main story quests. And overall, my impression was mostly positive. There was nothing that really surprised me or blew me away, but I did like what I saw well enough. I thought it was both immersive and interesting at certain points, and it also didn't have any initial glaring issues. So for that reason, I'm looking forward to seeing more. Now today, what I want to do is sit down and walk you through my time with the game. I want to go over everything I did see and do, and hopefully provide you a bit more clarity into what Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora is all about. Before we jump into the video though, a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Marvel Contest of Champions, a free-to-play competitive fighting game set in the Marvel universe, where you can reenact many famous battles between Marvel superheroes and supervillains. The game features team play, where you can join your friends in an alliance battling others from around the globe. Of course, you will be collecting and assembling a huge roster of both heroes and villains, and there's a campaign where you play through the iconic locations from across the Marvel universe. Now, over the years, the game has received tons of characters and content additions. Currently, they are hosting an event for Iron Man's comeback. From now until November 6th, you'll have the opportunity to experience this event had you missed it in the past. This will give you a chance to earn unique rewards, receive an upgraded Iron Man, along with 3 weeks of premium sigil subscription and a bunch of crystals. If you're interested in checking out Marvel Contest of Champions and jumping into the action yourself, go ahead and take a look at my link in the video description below. All right, so now back to Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. So for starters, yes, this is an open world game with all that entails. In fact, odds are any feature or content type that might come to mind when you hear open world game is likely present here. My hands-on session began with me being plopped into the middle of the wilderness, some length into the game's campaign, with a bunch of the sections already revealed of the map and parts of it cleared. I was just told to go and do whatever you want. So I wandered around a bit, and when I did, here's what I noticed. There were enemy camps. Mostly, I saw outpost and mining installations that were constructed by the Human Militaristic Corp known as the RDA. They've come to Pandora looking to plunder its natural resources and have set up camps all over the place to do just that. So when you come across a camp, you just go in, eliminate all the enemies, and capture that location. Doing so then allows nature to creep back in, which provides new valuable resources for you to collect. Unfortunately, in the build that I was playing, we were restricted to a limited area of the open world, and as far as I saw, all of these camps in that area were already cleared. So I actually didn't get to go through and see that process myself from start to finish, although the map did indicate areas where outposts once were and notated that they had been recaptured. I actually visited one of those recaptured locations, and I saw that it was full of these different hostile wildlife, but no more RDA. Had some containers and chests that I could loot, and then it was also overgrown with all sorts of plants. Speaking of which, Plants, plants, and more plants. Everywhere you look in this game, there are plants. The environment is just so densely packed with this massive variety of plant life, but this isn't just window dressing that's nice to look at. Much of it is helpful and useful as well. So there are, of course, resource plants to collect, used for both crafting and cooking. Some of this can be instantly gathered on the go, while others actually require you to stop for a little mini game where you have to find the proper angle to pull, usually a fruit or something like that, free from the plant's stalk. The game even has this system known as harvesting conditions, where for certain plants there will be these ideal circumstances for harvesting them, like it should be sunny, rainy, or even nighttime, and meeting those conditions will then reward a higher rarity of that resource. There are buff plants with all sorts of benefits for you while you're exploring. There are plants that heal, increase your run speed, or even enhance the damage you deal. There are traversal plants that can assist with moving through the environment, like folded over leaves that act as a launching pad, bouncy sunflowers that will shoot you straight up in the air, and hanging vines that you can pull on in order to climb. There are even progression plants like the bell sprig, which will permanently increase your maximum health. Some of these will be found out in the open, while others require a bit more figuring out. They could be placed in obscure locations, like in a cave with a hidden entrance, or inside of a tree trunk that requires you to climb before you drop down into it. And then there are the hostile plants. Oh boy, these are something. All sorts of hostile plants of different varieties. Ones that spew out some sort of poison, ones that impale you with spikes, cover you with a sticky substance that restricts movement, shocks you with electric bolts, or even explodes into a ball of fire if you get too close. I am sure that this is one of those things where when you play the game for a bunch, you spend enough time with it, you'll be able to learn how to quickly spot out which plants to avoid, but in my 2-hour window, I didn't have enough time to do that, and I just felt like I was constantly stumbling into all sorts of different dangerous plants, usually taking damage as a result. Now, beyond all the plants, there is of course a lot of different wildlife, a mix of friendly, neutral, and hostile creatures. You'll come across animals in distress, which you can aid. For example, I found this storm beast who had an RDA tracking device lodged into its side. I was actually able to soothe it to calm it down, which allowed me to approach close enough to remove the device. This was basically like a mini event, a dynamic event that you could come across, and it rewarded me some rare parts. You're going to see a wide array of neutral creatures wandering around everywhere you go, basically, some of which you'll want to hunt to harvest for their crafting resources. And then there's also an assortment of aggressive creatures that will just straight up attack you even if unprovoked. All different shapes, sizes, and temperaments for the wildlife in this game. Tons of plants, tons of wildlife. Also, while you are out exploring, you're going to come across other Navi, creatures like you. They'll usually be in small groups. Often they're going to call out to you if you walk near them. You approach them, and sometimes they'll just want to chat, either sharing their thoughts or discussing some recent events. Other times they'll have like a side quest for you to take on, or even just to offer you some resources just for the heck of it. Like, hey, here's some crafting resources, go make a potion or something. I actually quite appreciated this, as it made the world feel a whole lot more lived in and real. It wasn't just the case that Navi only hung out back in the base camps. They were also just regularly out in the wilderness doing their own thing, helping you, guiding you, giving you information. And speaking of bases, the game does have these as well. In particular, the one that I saw near me was called the Home Tree. This was, as you might expect, a massive tree, and it was home to the Eranchi clan of Navi artists. Now, checking out the base on my map actually indicated what I would find there, which in this case was a crafting table, cooking station, community basket, artisans, and a changing place. Now, presumably, with the fact that this list exists, that would tell me that different bases will likely have different stations and vendors, and you'll want to go to the ones for whatever it is you might happen to need. I visited this base for a few minutes, walked around the inside of a tree. It was pretty cool looking, few NPC vendors and stations that I could interact with, but I didn't spend a ton of time here. Now, beyond the RDA outpost where you'll go in and, like I said, you'll clear the RDA, take over the base that becomes overgrown with wildlife and plants. There's also a bunch of other buildings, RDA locations, and things that you will see, buildings, bases, structures scattered all around the world. And in these areas, besides RDA members and hostile wildlife, you're also gonna come across loot, most of which will be found in in various containers and chests scattered all about. Inside of these, you will find resources, consumables, and even gear, as yes, the game does have both character equipment as well as weapons that you can find and collect. You'll also find a lot of different narrative objects in these locations, what you expect here, notes, audio logs, and other items that will just tell you a bit of story, unravel either a side story or part of the main narrative, just give you more information about the world. And then there's also a bunch of in-world points of interest. There are ones that you just stumble across as you're walking around, and when you do, they give you a new task to complete. At one point, I actually found this big totem. It was all twisted into the stump of this old tree, painted with bright colors. As I got close to it, there was some dialogue between myself and some other character I was communicating with. Don't actually know who it was because, again, we were just plopped into the middle of the game, but I talked with someone through a headset, I believe, and they told me a bit about the history of the totem. Now, on one side of the totem, there was actually this triangle-shaped structure that formed what looked like an arrow pointing in a direction. So following that arrow led me to another and another and another. After a minute or two of trouncing around through the woods, past thick foliage, over some rocks, I ended up coming to the end of the line, which played some nice music. My character shared some of their thoughts about the beauty of this like giant stone arch, and then I gained some experience. So yeah, points of interest that you find, and there'll be things there that you do, different like in-world activities that give you some experience because this game has like character leveling as well. Other points of interest I came across in my playtime included an abandoned RDA field lab, which is actually where I could go to do some very specific crafting and even get some weapon upgrades. There was a workbench here that clearly could be interacted with and used. I just had to power it up first. I didn't find the time to do it, but that is something that exists. I also happened to come across at one point this crashed helicopter, and there were some RDA mech units around it, and they were shooting wildlife, so I engaged with them. My longbow made pretty quick work of it. They themselves dropped some ammunition, and then there was also, next to the helicopter, a bunch of containers that had some loot inside. The game has a day-night cycle as well, which I did get to see in action. There is also weather conditions, so you're gonna have like foggy and rainy weather depending on where it's at the moment. This not only has an impact on visibility, but also gameplay. For example, as I mentioned earlier, some resources will yield more during certain weather conditions or time of day conditions. And you can even pass the time. There are various campfires around the world. If you basically go there to rest, and it will move you through the day. Now, you do have a map as well, as expected. This will give you a nice aerial view of the open world. It'll have names for each individual region and icons for any major points of interest that you've discovered or that you happen to have a quest for. Also, the bigger points of interest, things like any outposts that you've cleared or any of the Na'vi bases, they have fast travel as soon as you unlock them. And this is very welcome because at one point I zoomed the map all the way out, and from what I could tell, it looks like this game is going to be absolutely massively large. So the fast travel is welcome. The fact that this game has flying, which you can do anywhere unrestricted from what I know, is also welcome, but we'll get to the flying in a moment. So this was just like time that I was spending kind of wandering around the environment, just checking out different things. It's an open world game. I wanted to see what is it like just doing stuff in the open world. I will say probably one of my biggest takeaway from this part of the demo was how immersive it felt between the density and the variety of the flora and fauna, all of the different locations types between just the natural environments, the Na'vi areas, and then the RDA installments, and the sheer size of the world, all that combined with really nice ambient audio noises, and it was just really enjoyable. It really felt like a living space that I was spending time in. It also helped, I will say, a lot in my opinion, that they have gone with a very minimal user interface. Like, often the joke with Ubisoft open world games is that half your screen is filled up with UI markers pointing to everything around you and your 1,000 list of objectives. But in Avatar, from what I've seen, there's little to none of this. Like, there's a small compass at the top, you've got a health and energy meter at the bottom middle, and then the weapon slots at the bottom right, but that is basically it. Like, they have gone with a very limited UI rather than the typical Ubisoft overcrowded, cluttered UI, and I really, really appreciate that. So that was like the first half, basically, of my time, the first hour, where I was just wandering around the open world, just seeing what it was like, what there was to do and see. At this point, after an hour, I decided to take on the first main quest, and this was called Eye of Iwa. My first task was to harvest this mangrove hive nectar. I had to go to a special part of the map, find these mangroves, and then pull the nectar from its roots. When I turned that in, I was then asked to track down and bond with my very own Ikron. These are essentially the game's version of flying mounts, and they play a big role in the movies as well, but honestly, I couldn't tell you too much about that. Just I'm just here for the video game. Don't really care too much about the franchise. Now, in order for me to get my Ikron, it actually required a bit of work. It was actually an entire 10-minute sequence of following it up the side of this massive floating rock formation. And this was really cool, actually. It was sort of like an extended traversal puzzle, climbing rocks, jumping gaps, clearing obstacles to open doorways, and ultimately reaching the top, cornering the poor beast, and taming it. It might sound pretty basic, but I felt the presentation was so well done between the puzzle itself of just traversing, the vistas that provided a really nice backdrop, and that combined with the nice ambient music. I quite enjoyed this experience of getting to the top of this formation and bonding with the Ikron. Now, after taming this, I got to name it. I went with Storm, and then I received a little flight lesson. You can adjust the flight speed, you can strafe left and right, you got a speed boost to go up and down, you know, ascend and descend, and then you have the ability to dismount at any time, which leads to probably the coolest thing about flying in this game is that you can summon your Ikron mid-air whenever you want. So you could jump from a massive floating island and then summon your mount right before hitting the ground. I really like that they've done it this way. So I flew around for a little while just getting a hang of what I could do, and then I was tasked with taking out those scum RDA. They had these floating platforms that were set up, which was disrupting some local wildlife. I made my way over, landed on the platform. I shot RDA helicopter out of the sky, which hilariously enough only took like a couple of bullets. That was something. And then I had to hack this terminal with my special hacking gun, I'll call it. Basically, at first you have to line up these circles just using the trigger on the gamepad. And then once you complete that, you're asked to trace your way along this path. Doing this then revealed the platform's power source, which I could shoot and destroy. I did this a couple more times, and after destroying the platforms, I was asked to infiltrate and shut down an RDA hydro oil extractor. And this is where I got my really first good look at combat in the whole play session. Of my 2 hours with the game, I think I spent a total of 20 to 30 minutes actually engaged in combat. It definitely wasn't the focus. The main reason was just how they set things up. Like I mentioned earlier, as far as I could tell, every single RDA camp out in the wilderness that we had access to was already cleared by the time I was starting playing. I'm pretty certain that they did this so that we wouldn't get too distracted and would focus on the main story quest and maybe do a little bit of side exploration. But normally in games like this, clearing camps is the first and main thing I enjoy doing. Like, I love going in, sneaking in, or going in guns blazing, taking out all the patrols, and then taking out any important structures in the base, then clearing the base, take it over for myself, and then heading on to the next base and doing it over again. In open world games, especially in like Ubisoft open world games, this is like one of the main things I enjoy doing, but that really wasn't an option in this particular play session. Because yes, all of the RDA camps were already cleared, so my combat didn't come until the very tail end of my hands-on time. When I did finally reach that point in the main story quest where they asked me to go here, I headed to the outpost and I did the base clearing thing. It had a mix of foot soldiers, mechs, as well as turrets. Now, I tried sneaking in at first. Initially, it was successful. I was able to one-shot this patrolling soldier with my longbow, but then I tried shooting the weak spot on a mech, hoping it would just explode it or disable it, and I could keep going silently. That's not what happened. It didn't die. It was pissed off, and it alerted the entire base, at which point set off the alarms, put everyone on high alert, searching for me, and also activating those turrets. Now, my primary goal here was to get into the facility and shut down 2 drill towers, turn off the generators, and then close down a water pipeline. I did that while also taking out every enemy I could see, and during this, getting to actually spend some time with fighting, it seemed fine. It was all pretty straightforward in terms of features and mechanics. You point and shoot, you aim for the weak points, but there wasn't a lot of depth beyond that. For the movement, you've got a sprint, slide, jump, and crouch. There do appear to be some light stealth mechanics, although nothing intense, and I didn't see what looked like a stealth takedown. Maybe it's there, but I didn't happen to see it. So what are you doing when you're actually fighting? Well, it pretty much boils down to you have a punch for a melee and then ranged attacks. Lots of ranged attack options. In fact, fighting from a distance does seem to be the main focus here in Avatar, as I saw no melee weapons besides the punch. I guess it's possible that that changes later on, but not as far as I saw. There were 3 tiers of bows from what I saw: light, heavy, and longbow. The longbow had the longest draw time, but also hit the hardest and had the longest range. The light bow drew quickly, but wasn't as powerful and had a shorter range. And then the heavy bow looked to split the difference. I would actually say that the bow gameplay felt quite good, and every bow had a real nice thwunk sound to it when you let go of the arrow, sending it hurling towards the enemy. There was a nice feel to the bow gameplay, is how I would simply put it. There are also RDA weapons, which are basically just guns. Now, an assault rifle is what I had access to in the demo. I'm going to assume that there will be other human-based weaponry as well, things like pistols, shotguns, SMGs, and other rifles. Not certain, but I'm hoping there's more than just an assault rifle, right? And then you had the staff sling, which can be used to launch various grenades like stun and explosive. I didn't make too much use of it, but this is another tool at your disposal. You also have the tool of X-ray vision. You can actually toggle this at any time. It doesn't even have a resource, and when doing so, it will highlight any interactable objects, collectibles, loot containers, objectives, and hostile creatures. It's like Batman vision. You see through the walls, you know where the enemies are at any time. There are environmental objects, like I saw a variety of explosive barrels you could shoot to damage enemies, and there's of course ammunition for your weapons, both arrows and bullets. The game does have a quick craft option with the radial menu, so you can pull up the menu, and so long as you have the resources, you can quickly craft more arrows and bullets while you're moving. There's also different types of ammos, like there's the normal ammunition, but then also elemental ones. I think I saw like lightning and fire imbued ones, depending on the weapon that you're using. The game has consumables in the form of food that you can eat on the go. Again, pull up a radial menu while moving, select whatever food item that you place there. These include healing, yes, but also a variety of foods that give you different offensive and defensive buffs. Now, in terms of how the gameplay felt, like how did it feel to play Avatar, it's actually a bit hard for me to say. The reason for that being is that I played this preview from my home using Parsec. Now, if you're unfamiliar, Parsec is a remote desktop application. So the game that I was playing was actually running from a computer at some Ubisoft office somewhere and streamed to me, and I was playing that streamed version from my PC. And I'll say this, no matter how good of a connection you have, this will always result in some sort of latency. And to me, at least, it's always noticeable. I just vastly prefer playing games that run natively on my local hardware than playing games via streaming, but unfortunately that was the only option here in this circumstance. That latency, however minor, plus the fact that I had to play with a controller as they didn't yet have mouse and keyboard support ready, did put a bit of a negative tint on the experience. I just vastly prefer mouse and keyboard for first-person shooters for one, and I also prefer low latency playing locally, like I said, for two. But with those things in mind, it still seemed like the gameplay, when we're considering things like the sounds and animations side of it, that seemed well done enough. Like I said, pretty basic, pretty bare bones in terms of feature set. That could be a consequence of where we were in the game. Maybe, I don't know how far into the game we were, basically. Was it 1 hour? Was it 5 hours? Was it 10 hours into the campaign? How much into the game's feature set had we really unlocked? It's hard for me to know for sure. Maybe there's a lot more and the variety of combat becomes a lot more interesting. But yeah, it's just pretty straightforward point and shoot. There's not a lot to consider other than that as far as I could see. But again, I could be wrong. I do want to mention a couple of the menu things as well. So for your character setup, there's 4 gear slots. These will be for chest, arms, legs, and feet, as well as 4 weapon slots where you can swap between the bows and the RDA weapons. Now, for both the weapons and the gear that you find and or craft, these actually come in the traditional RPG rarities, moving up different color rare items, and the rarer the items, the stronger they are, which means they deal more damage or have more defenses or include additional bonus stats. Armor in particular actually adds to your total health and then will come with some resistances. You can also place mods in your armor pieces. These will add bonuses to things like your health, energy, and some combat relevant stats. And then the weapons, as they increase in rarity, they will deal more damage. This also varies depending on the weapon type, and weapons also have their own mods which you can apply to them. And then this game has leveling, and with that it has a skill tree. The skill tree had 5 different categories. The first category was Survivor. This focused on your health, energy, carry capacity, and defenses versus plants and wildlife. The second tree was Warrior, which was combat focused, increasing the damage you deal with various weapons, as well as things like the number of weapons you can carry and the amount of ammo you can carry. There was the Hunter tree, which had all sorts of hunting and ammunition management nodes, and there were 2 other trees, but I actually didn't get a close look at those, so I can't exactly tell you what they do. Now, each one of the trees that I did see had what was known as an apex memory, sort of like ultimate ability. So in the Warrior tree, for example, unlocking the memories of the Warrior made it so that whenever I hit a target with a bow or spear, it would briefly have a chance to disorient them, which I assume is like some sort of a stun or disable. This did require first unlocking 13 skills in the Warrior tree, and then once you did that, it had some sort of an apex challenge which you had to complete, probably like a hunting mission or something along those lines. In terms of how you get skill points, well, you of course get them by leveling up. The things you do gives you XP. The XP levels you up. Once you level up, you get a skill point, but then also I saw skill points rewarded for completing main quest. Certainly at least some of the main quest, maybe even some side quests, though I'm not sure. So to wrap this all up, I will say overall, I did like what I saw. I do think the game, first of all, looks absolutely fantastic visually. Really, really pretty looking game, really good environmental design. Just the world of Pandora is a pretty looking one, and they've done a good job of representing that here in this game. I'd also say that the audio design and music were on point. Some of the soundtracks were just really, really good, really immersive, really helped pull me into the world. And yes, speaking of immersive, this is super immersive space, densely packed with both flora and fauna, and there appeared to be, from what I did see briefly, a lot to do. I would say probably my biggest initial concern at this point with the limited time that I played would be the depth of combat. I would say it just feels a little shallow. Point and shoot is about all it seems to come down to, but I hope I'm wrong here. As I've said though, 2 hours is not a ton of time, especially when thrown into a game without a tutorial. A chunk of my play session was spent just getting my bearings, figuring out the controls and the different abilities and mechanics of the game. So I definitely want to sit down and really get a good chunk of time to play through uninterrupted before I form any solid impressions. But still, overall, yes, I did enjoy my time with Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And that is going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope this gives you some more details, information, and gives you a clear picture of what this game is all about. And yeah, I will be sure to follow up once this game actually comes out. I want to sit down, play it a bunch, and actually see everything it has to offer. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Take it easy.